You're nothing without me, Ivy. Don't forget that. You're lucky I'm putting up with you. Blake spat, his voice cutting through the tension like a knife. His eyes were cold, lips curling in disdain as he looked at me from across the dining table. I could feel the heat rising to my cheeks. I clenched my fists under the table to keep from trembling. This wasn't the first time Blake belittled me, but tonight was different. There was nothing left of the man I had married, only this stranger who thrived on crushing my spirit. His high-paying job made him think he was king of our household, and I was just a serf. I'm doing my best, I said quietly, trying to keep my voice steady. My freelance work is going well. I just landed a new client today. A new client? Blake laughed, the sound harsh and mocking. Your freelance project is a cute little hobby, Ivy. Don't forget whose salary actually pays the bills around here. He leaned back in his chair, crossing his arms. Graphic design, he sneered as if the very words were beneath him. What would you even do without me? You'd be penniless. Remember that. I felt my frustration bubbling over. This wasn't about the bills or money. It was about respect, something Blake seemed to have forgotten. Blake, this is important to me. It's a real job, even if you don't see it that way. I'm contributing, too. Blake's expression hardened. You're contributing nothing but headaches. I manage the finances. I make the tough decisions. You play on your computer. There's a big difference. The air felt thick with unspoken anger. He always managed our money, giving me just enough to get by. Even groceries felt like an uphill battle. But despite the control, I had been putting money aside, little by little, without Blake knowing. Blake stood up abruptly. I'm done with this conversation. His tone was final, absolute, meant to put me back in my place. Clean up the kitchen. I'm going to bed. As he walked away, I could feel the tears welling up, but I swallowed them back. Not tonight. I wouldn't let him see me break. Not again. In the quiet of the kitchen, I scrubbed the dishes with more force than necessary, trying to wash away the frustration clinging to me. Later, I sat at my small desk in the living room, my computer screen glowing softly. Blake's words echoed in my mind, but they fueled something new within me. Not fear. Not sadness. Determination. Sophie's text notification popped up on my phone. How's it going tonight? I hesitated, but replied truthfully. Same old. Can we talk tomorrow? Of course. Anytime. He was my lifeline, the one person who saw through Blake's facade and encouraged me to stand up for myself. I took a deep breath and opened my project files. Seeing the colorful, creative work in progress was like a balm to my wounded pride. This was mine. This was my future. Blake's condescending laughter still rang in my ears, but I focused on the design before me, vowing silently that I wouldn't let his words define my worth. I would prove him wrong. This fight wasn't over, not by a long shot. With renewed determination, I began working on my project, each click of the mouse a step towards reclaiming my life from Blake's shadow. The next morning, the smell of coffee greeted me as I entered the kitchen. Blake sat at the table, his head buried in the morning paper. He didn't even look up as I poured myself a cup. Don't forget to pick up my dry cleaning, he said, his tone authoritative. And we need to talk about your spending. You've been going over budget on groceries again. I bit back my retort. It seemed everything I did was wrong in his eyes. Sure, I'll take care of it, I muttered, grabbing my coffee and heading for the door. Outside, the crisp air was a relief from the stifling tension inside. I made my way to Sophie's place across the street, grateful for the brief escape. She opened the door almost immediately, a concerned look on her face. Morning, Ivy. You okay? Sophie asked, ushering me inside. I sank into her comfy couch, finally able to breathe. Same old, I said, shrugging. Blake had another meltdown over money this morning. Sophie shook her head, handing me a steaming mug of tea. You deserve better than this, Ivy. You're talented and hard-working. Have you thought about setting up a separate account? Something he can't touch? A glimmer of hope sparked inside me. Actually, I already have one. I've been saving what I can from my freelance earnings. It's not much, but it's something. Sophie's eyes lit up. See? You're already making moves. Just keep building on that. You need to be ready for anything. I nodded, feeling a renewed sense of determination. Thanks, Sophie. I don't know what I'd do without you. She gripped my hand reassuringly. You're stronger than you think, Ivy. Just keep pushing forward. Back home, I sat at my computer, diving into work. The project flowed effortlessly, my client's excitement contagious. But it wasn't long before Blake's looming presence interrupted my focus. "Ivy, come here," he barked from the living room. I hurried over, feeling my stomach knot. Blake was standing, arms crossed. "I looked through our finances. We're tight this month. You've been spending too much again." "That's not fair," I replied, trying to keep my voice calm. "Prices have gone up. I'm doing the best I can with what you give me." His eyes flashed with anger. "You always have an excuse that maybe if you focused less on your art and more on running this household, we wouldn't have these problems." I said nothing, my jaw clenched tight. Any response would only escalate the situation. Blake sighed in exasperation. "Just be more careful, okay? I'm tired of having this conversation." I nodded, turning away before he could see the tears threatening to spill over. Back at my desk, I forced myself to focus on my work again, using the creative process as a sanctuary from his relentless criticism. Later, as I stepped out to run errands, I found myself crossing paths with Vanessa, Blake's colleague. She flashed me a polite smile, seemingly unaware of the storm brewing in my marriage. Little did she know, she was part of it. At the grocery store, I carefully budgeted with the meager amount Blake allowed. The cashier's sympathetic smile felt like a small comfort in a sea of frustration. As I loaded the bags into my car, my phone buzzed. Another client inquiry. Small victories, I thought, starting the engine and heading home. The day passed in the same tense rhythm. By nightfall, the house was silent, Blake already asleep. I stood at the window, looking out at the darkened street. Sophie's encouraging words echoed in my mind. Just keep pushing forward. Taking a deep breath, I returned to my desk, immersing myself in my work. I was building something that was mine and mine alone, steadily chipping away at the chains Blake had wrapped around my life. This was just the beginning. "Can you please make sure dinner is ready by 6? Blake called out from the living room, his voice dripping with entitlement. I took a deep breath, pausing my work to answer him. "Sure, Blake. I'll start cooking in a bit." "Better be on time this time," he muttered, barely loud enough to hear. I gritted my teeth, pushing down the surge of irritation. Later at Sophie's place, I shared my struggle with her. "I can't keep living like this. He's relentless, Sophie." "Why don't you take on more freelance projects?" she suggested over a cup of coffee. "Save more money. Build a safety net." I nodded, the idea growing roots in my mind. I'm already taking as many as I can handle without him noticing. But you're right. I need more. "Sophie," I leaned closer. "There's something else. I think Blake's having an affair." Her eyes widened. "Are you sure?" "Not yet," I admitted. "But I found a hotel receipt in his jacket. I need more evidence." Sophie squeezed my hand. "Be careful, Ivy, but you deserve to know the truth." Back at home, I waited for Blake to leave for work the next morning. As soon as he was out the door, I rummaged through his things, finding nothing substantial. Frustrated, I decided to bide my time, watching for more clues. Days later, I found what I was looking for. Another receipt, this time from an expensive restaurant, slipped from his briefcase. My heart sank, but I kept my face neutral. That night, I didn't say a word about it. Instead, I focused on work and took on more projects, each completed job bringing me a bit closer to independence. My secret savings grew steadily, despite Blake's constant attempts to undermine my confidence. About a week later, an opportunity presented itself. Blake was called out on a late-night work emergency. Realizing my chance, I searched through his jacket pockets again, finding a forgotten note with Vanessa's name and phone number. I snapped a picture of it with my phone, my suspicions solidifying into certainty. That weekend, Blake announced he had a late meeting with a client. "Don't wait up," he said, grabbing his keys. The air was thick with unspoken tension. I watched him walk out, a mixture of anger and resolve bubbling inside me. I waited half an hour before making a call to the hotel he had visited. "Hello, I'm looking for Blake Parker's room," I said, masking my voice's tremble. "Blake Parker is staying in room 204? The receptionist confirmed cheerfully. There it was, the confirmation I dreaded and yet needed to hear. As I hung up, my phone buzzed with a message from Sophie. "You okay? Do you need anything?" "I'm good, thanks," I replied, the weight of my discovery pressing down on me. Blake returned late, reeking of guilt and expensive cologne. I bit back the urge to confront him, knowing I needed to be strategic. Patience would serve me better now. Instead, I continued my routine, recording his verbal abuse and keeping track of every shifty move. My carefully curated evidence grew piece by piece. One final straw would snap the fragile thread of my tolerance. At Sophie's suggestion, I began networking more aggressively, boosting my freelance profile. I dove into my work with renewed energy, each completed project a symbol of my found strength. The pieces were falling into place. Blake's arrogance blinded him to the gradual shift in our dynamic. I was no longer trapped. I was preparing to break free, and when the time came, there would be no turning back. I sat across from Sophie, a pile of design mock-ups between us. "These are looking fantastic, Ivy," she said, flipping through the pages. "You think you can take on more clients?" I nodded, determined. "Definitely. I need as many projects as I can get." "Good," Sophie said, smiling. "Let's get you connected with some of my contacts." They're always looking for quality designers. Over the next few weeks, Sophie and I worked tirelessly to enhance my portfolio and network with new clients. Every small success was a victory, boosting my confidence. My savings grew steadily as Blake remained blissfully unaware of my plans. One night, as I worked late on a project, Blake hovered behind me, watching silently. Suspicious but unsure, he finally broke his silence. "What are you doing, Ivy?" "Just finishing a freelance project," I replied calmly, keeping my eyes on the screen. Blake scoffed. "You and these little projects, make sure you're not neglecting your responsibilities around here." "I'm not," I said firmly. "This work is important to me." He sighed, shaking his head. "Just don't let it interfere with the household. You need to prioritize better." Tension cranked up a notch, but I continued undeterred, knowing I was building towards something bigger. Meanwhile, Blake's behavior grew more erratic. He constantly checked on me, his suspicion fueling a toxic atmosphere at home. One evening, after a particularly heated argument over money, I knew I had to act faster. "Sophie, I need your help," I said, my voice shaky as I explained the latest confrontation. "We'll get you through this, Ivy," she reassured, holding my hand. "Focus on gathering all the evidence you need. I'll help you however I can." The next day, I decided to install a small camera in the living room, discreetly hidden among the books on the shelf. It was my insurance, my means of capturing his aggression and painting the true picture of our life together. As Blake continued his escapades with Vanessa, leaving little clues here and there, I collected each piece methodically. The recordings piled up, his scathing remarks, his controlling behavior, his blatant disrespect. One night, I reviewed the footage alone at my desk. Blake's voice filled the room, laced with contempt. "You're worthless, Ivy. Without me, you're nothing." The words stung, but they also fortified my resolve. Days later, Blake left his laptop open as he took a call in another room. Heart-pounding, I seized the opportunity, quickly accessing his email. There it was, a string of messages with Vanessa, detailing their meetings and expenses. I copied everything, making sure to leave no trace. After he left for work the following morning, I met Sophie in my kitchen. "I've got it all," I said quietly, showing her the evidence. Her eyes widened as she scrolled through the emails. "This is enough, Ivy. You can confront him now. You've got everything you need." I nodded, bracing myself. "I just need to time it right, when he's least expecting it." That evening, Blake arrived home in a foul mood, grumbling about work. "Dinner ready?" he barked. "It's almost done," I replied, keeping my tone neutral. As we sat down to eat, I watched him carefully, feeling a strange mix of fear and empowerment. Soon, I would confront him, and this charade would end. I had built my case, strengthened my position, and was ready to reclaim my life. With every bite, I steeled my nerves, knowing the moment of truth was fast approaching. The game was nearly over, and this time, I would emerge victorious. Blake stormed through the front door, slamming it behind him. "Ivy, we need to talk," he shouted. I looked up from the kitchen table, where I had been working on my latest freelance project. This was it, the moment I had been preparing for. "What is it, Blake?" I asked, trying to keep my voice steady. He threw his briefcase onto the couch, glaring at me. "I want you to quit your freelance work. It's taking up too much of your time. You need to be focused on this household, not your silly hobby." My heart pounded, but I stood my ground. "Blake, my work is important. It's not just a hobby. I'm contributing to our finances, and it brings me fulfillment." his face contorted with rage. You call this contributing? What you do is insignificant compared to what I bring in. You need to understand your place, Ivy. Something inside me snapped. I reached for the folder I had prepared, my hands surprisingly steady. Blake, sit down. We need to talk. He looked taken aback, but his arrogance only deepened. This better be quick, he muttered, sitting down. I placed the folder in front of him. Open it, I said. Blake's eyes scanned the documents, printed emails, hotel receipts, financial records. His face turned pale. What is this? He growled, trying to cover his shock. This, I said calmly, is proof of your infidelity and mismanagement of our finances. I've had enough, Blake. I'm done being your doormat. His shock turned to fury. You think this little file is going to scare me, Ivy? You're delusional. Do you honestly believe you can survive without me? I've already started, I replied, my voice gaining strength. I have my savings, a growing client base, and support from people who actually respect me. Blake's eyes narrowed, and he stood up abruptly, leaning over the table. You think you can just walk away from this marriage? I'll make sure you get nothing. You hear me? Nothing. I met his gaze, unflinching. I have enough evidence to ensure you won't be able to control everything anymore. And guess what? I want a separation. He scoffed, shaking his head. Fine, Ivy. You want a separation? Good luck. You'll come crawling back once you realize you can't handle the real world. I stood up, matching his aggression with a calm determination. I'm done living under your shadow, Blake. You'll see just how capable I am. Now pack your things and get out. Blake stood there, his expression a mix of disbelief and fury. You're making a huge mistake, Ivy. No, I said firmly. The mistake was thinking I needed you. Without another word, Blake grabbed his briefcase and stormed upstairs. I heard the sounds of drawers opening and closing, his anger palpable even through the walls. When he finally emerged, a suitcase in hand, he paused at the door. You'll regret this, Ivy, he said, his voice low and menacing. Goodbye, Blake, I replied, not looking back as he left. As the door clicked shut behind him, a wave of relief washed over me. It wasn't the end, but it was a new beginning. I walked to the window, taking in the quiet street outside, feeling a sense of calm I hadn't felt in years. It was time to rebuild, and for the first time in a long time, I felt free. Blake moved out that evening. At first, he seemed confident, as if certain he could manipulate me into taking him back. But as days turned into weeks, reality began to set in. Ivy, we need to talk, Blake said one afternoon, standing on the porch, a forced smile on his face. I opened the door, but didn't invite him in. What is it, Blake? I miss you, he said, unconvincingly. This whole separation thing, it was a mistake. We should try to work things out. I crossed my arms, standing firm. Work things out? After everything you've done? No, Blake. I'm moving forward with the divorce. His face darkened, the facade of charm slipping. Do you really want to ruin both our lives over this? Think about it, Ivy. You can't make it on your own. I already am, I said calmly. I've landed a major contract with a marketing firm. I'm financially independent, Blake. I don't need you. Blake's eyes flickered with anger. How can you do this to me? You think you can just erase me from your life? You brought this on yourself, I replied. Now, if there's nothing else, I'd appreciate it if you left. Blake stormed off, muttering curses under his breath. I watched him go, feeling a strange mix of pity and satisfaction. He was starting to realize he had lost control. A few days later, I received a call from a mutual friend, Lisa. Ivy, have you heard? Blake's affair with Vanessa. Everyone at his office knows. It's causing quite a stir. Really? I said, unable to hide my satisfaction. Interesting. It's all over the place, Lisa continued. Apparently, Blake tried to blame you for his stress at home, but no one's buying it. His reputation is in shambles. I thanked Lisa and hung up, sitting back with a sense of vindication. Blake's world was crumbling, and he had no one to blame but himself. A week later, Blake showed up again, but this time his demeanor was different. Desperate. Ivy, wait, he called out as I was heading to my car. What do you want, Blake? I said, not stopping. I am sorry, he stammered. I was wrong. Please, can we talk? I turned to face him. Talk about what? You've shown your true colors. I'll quit my job. I'll do anything. Just give me another chance. He looked pathetic, a shadow of the man who once tried to dominate my life. I shook my head slowly. It's too late for that, Blake. You need to face the consequences of your actions. As I drove away, I felt lighter. Blake's downfall was his own doing, and he was finally reaping what he had sown. The next few weeks saw Blake's life unravel further. Vanessa left him for another colleague, someone with better prospects. The scandal at his workplace grew, leading to his termination. Friends distanced themselves, unwilling to associate with a sinking ship. Meanwhile, my freelance business thrived. The major contract I had mentioned to Blake was just the beginning. New clients poured in, drawn by the quality and dedication I put into every project. My confidence soared, and my financial independence was solidified. I finalized the divorce, gaining significant compensation from Blake. He was left with a tarnished career and a bleak personal life. The irony wasn't lost on me. His arrogance had led him to this point. One evening, as I sat in my newly decorated living room, I received a text from Sophie. "Celebration dinner tomorrow?" "You've earned it." "Absolutely," I replied, smiling to myself. The future looked bright, and for the first time in years I felt truly free. Blake's chapter in my life was closed, and I was ready for whatever came next. I stood in the conference room, waiting for my meeting with the marketing firm's executives. The glass walls offered a view of the bustling city below. My heart raced with anticipation, but I felt confident. This was a far cry from the timid Ivy who once cowered under Blake's shadow. The door opened, and Mr. Thompson, the firm's director, walked in with a warm smile. "Ivy, good to see you again. Come on in." "Thank you for having me, Mr. Thompson," I said, shaking his hand. He led me to the table where several other executives were seated. "Everyone, this is Ivy Parker, the talented graphic designer we've been hearing so much about." I took a seat, feeling a surge of pride as they nodded in acknowledgement. "This campaign is crucial for us, Ivy," Mr. Thompson continued. "We've seen your work, and we're confident you're the right person for the job." We spent the next hour discussing the project. They were impressed with my ideas, and by the end of the meeting, I had secured the contract. As I walked out of the building, the weight of my achievements settled in. I had built a thriving business and established myself as a respected professional. Back at my new apartment, I reviewed the contract, excitement bubbling within me. The phone rang, interrupting my thoughts. It was Sophie. "How did it go?" she asked, her voice eager. "I got it," I said, unable to keep the triumph from my voice. "That's amazing, Ivy. Let's celebrate tonight." "Definitely. I'll see you at 7, I replied, hanging up with a grin. I glanced around my apartment, a symbol of my newfound freedom. It was cozy, filled with personal touches, and devoid of Blake's oppressive presence. I couldn't help but feel a sense of satisfaction. Blake's downfall had paved the way for my rise. Later at the restaurant, Sophie and I clinked our glasses together. "To new beginnings," she toasted. "To new beginnings," I echoed, smiling. "Thank you for always supporting me, Sophie. I couldn't have done this without you." "Hey, you did all the hard work? I just gave you a little nudge," she said, grinning. Our laughter filled the air, a stark contrast to the tense, unhappy dinners I once had with Blake. I realized how far I had come, and how much I had gained from walking away. The next morning, I received an unexpected email. It was from Vanessa. "Ivy, I don't know if you'll read this, but I wanted to apologize. I never meant to hurt you. Blake deceived me too. I've left him and moved on. I hope you find peace." I stared at the message, feeling a strange mix of emotions. I had no intention of replying, but it was a reminder of how much had changed. Blake's attempts to reach out continued to fail. His calls and messages went unanswered. He was now working a menial job after struggling to find employment in his field, his reputation too tarnished to recover. He had become the epitome of lost potential while I had thrived. I felt no pity for him. This was his karma, the consequence of his arrogance and betrayal. He had underestimated me, and now he was living with the results. As for me, my life was full of new opportunities and possibilities. I had not only survived, but flourished. The future was mine to shape, free from the shadows of my past. That evening, as I sat on my balcony, watching the city lights, I felt a deep sense of contentment. The journey had been tough, but it had made me stronger. And with every breath, I welcomed the promise of the days to come, confident that I could take on anything life threw my way. The sun streamed through the windows of my new apartment, casting a warm glow over my fresh start. It had only been a few weeks since the divorce was finalized, and I felt a profound sense of freedom. My business continued to thrive, and the future looked brighter than ever. "Ivy, how about we grab lunch today?" Sophie texted early that morning. "Sounds perfect. Noon at our usual spot?" I replied, smiling at her perfect timing. At the cafe, Sophie and I chatted over sandwiches and iced coffee. She couldn't stop smiling. "You look so much happier, Ivy. It's like a weight has been lifted." "It has been," I admitted. "I'm finally living the life I want, without anyone holding me back." We spent the afternoon reminiscing and planning new adventures. The ease of our friendship was a stark contrast to the tension that used to consume my days with Blake. I felt grateful for every moment of peace and happiness. Back at my apartment, I looked around with pride. Each piece of furniture, every painting on the wall, reflected my taste, my choices. It was a sanctuary of my own making. Later that evening, a knock at the door interrupted my work. I opened it to find Blake standing there, looking disheveled and defeated. "What do you want, Blake?" I asked, keeping my voice steady. "Ivy, please," he begged. "Can I come in?" "No, Blake. Whatever you have to say, you can say it here." He hesitated, his eyes filled with a desperation I had never seen before. "I lost my job, Ivy. Everything's gone downhill since you left. I don't know what to do." I felt a pang of pity, but I stood firm. "That's not my problem anymore, Blake. You made your choices and now you have to live with them." "Please, Ivy," he said, his voice breaking. "I made mistakes, but I've learned my lesson. I need help." I shook my head, the resolve in my voice unwavering. "You took everything from me, Blake. My confidence, my happiness. It's time you learned to stand on your own." His shoulders slumped as he realized the finality of my words. "I don't know what to say," he murmured. "Goodbye, Blake," I said, closing the door. As the lock clicked into place, I felt a sense of closure. The chapter with Blake was truly over. Over the next few weeks, life continued to flourish. My business grew even more successful, and I found joy in every new project and client interaction. Sophie and I celebrated each victory, big and small, her support unwavering. One crisp autumn morning, I found myself standing in front of a beautiful old building in the heart of the city. With my newfound success, I was ready to invest in an apartment of my own, a place even more representative of the new life I had built. I signed the papers with a mix of excitement and pride. That evening, Sophie and I toasted to new beginnings in my soon-to-be home. "To your amazing journey, Ivy," she said, raising her glass. "You've come so far, and I'm so proud of you." "To us," I replied, clinking glasses. "To the future and all the adventures it holds." As we sat on the balcony, overlooking the bustling streets below, I realized how much had changed since Blake had walked out of my life. His downfall had been his own doing, and I had not just survived but thrived. I was more than the sum of his betrayal. I was resilient, independent, and ready to embrace whatever life brought my way. In the quiet of the night, I felt content and hopeful. The journey had been long and challenging, but every step had led me here, to a place of peace and newfound strength. The future was mine to write, and it brimmed with endless possibilities.